Most communities write their rules down. The Amish do something stranger than that. They build an entire way of life around a rulebook you can't buy, can't read, and in many places, can't even point to. And yet somehow, everybody knows it. They know what belongs in the home and what stays outside. They know how to dress, how to travel, how to worship, how to raise children, and even where a piece of technology crosses an invisible line. To outsiders, it can feel mysterious, maybe even contradictory. Why is one machine acceptable, but another isn't? Why can some Amish ride in cars, but not own them? Why can a phone exist nearby, but not in the house? The answer is not random. And it's not just about being old-fashioned. Because behind the plain clothes, the horse-drawn buggies, and the quiet farms is something much deeper, a living system of boundaries, memory, faith, and community. A system powerful enough to survive in one of the most modern societies on Earth without ever becoming fully written down. And once you understand that, the Amish stop looking like a people frozen in time. They start looking like a people who made a decision most of the modern world never really made at all. They decided that not everything that can be adopted should be. That choice is the heart of this story. The unwritten Amish Rulebook is often called the Ordnung, a German word that roughly means order. But even that translation can be misleading, because this isn't one universal master document that every Amish person follows in exactly the same way. It changes from one church district to another. It is passed along through practice, memory, teaching, and shared life. And for many Amish communities, that's exactly the point. To understand why this unwritten code matters so much, you have to understand what the Amish are trying to protect. And that story begins long before the buggy. The Amish come out of the Anabaptist tradition in Europe, a branch of radical Christianity that took shape during the Reformation. Their ancestors believed in adult baptism, separation from the world, humility, nonviolence, and a disciplined church life. Over time, followers of Jacob Ammon separated from other Anabaptists in the late 1600s, and eventually those communities became known as Amish. Many later migrated to North America, where Amish settlements grew in places like Pennsylvania, Ohio, and Indiana. Today, there are hundreds of Amish settlements across the United States and Canada, with a population numbering around 400,000. But even as the numbers have grown, one thing has remained remarkably consistent. Daily life is still guided by community rules that are often local, oral, and deeply binding. That is where the unwritten rulebook comes in. The easiest mistake to make is assuming the Amish live by a list of prohibitions. No cars, no television, no grid electricity, no flashy clothes. And yes, from the outside, those visible restrictions stand out immediately. But that was only part of the story. The Ordnung is not really a catalog of no. It's a framework for deciding how a Christian community should remain humble, stable, and separate enough from the wider world to preserve its identity. It covers clothing, grooming, technology, worship, education, work, courtship, and everyday behavior. It tells people not just what to avoid, but how to belong. That matters, because in Amish life, belonging is not a side effect. It is the center. Plain dress, for example, is not simply a costume from another century. It is a social language. It signals modesty, restraint, and a refusal to turn the self into a performance. Men in many communities wear broad fall trousers, hats, suspenders, and after marriage, beards without mustaches. Women wear head coverings and plain dresses. To outsiders, that may look like uniformity for its own sake. But to the Amish, it communicates something larger. The individual should not be louder than the community. The same logic appears everywhere. Homes are plain. Worship services are held in houses or barns rather than church buildings. Districts are kept relatively small so members can gather in one another's homes. Even leisure is expected to stay within limits. Recreation isn't necessarily banned, but competition, vanity, and excess are viewed with caution. This is why the unwritten rulebook can seem both strict and subtle at the same time. It reaches into very ordinary details, because ordinary details are where values become visible. And that leads to the next question. Why keep such an important system unwritten? At first, that seems almost impossible. How can a society preserve order without a fixed public text? In the modern world, we're trained to believe that legitimacy comes from documentation. Contracts, Handbooks, constitutions, policy manuals. If a rule matters, we assume it must be written somewhere. The Amish don't entirely reject written religious sources. They read the Bible, devotional works, and other faith materials. But the Ordnung itself, in many communities, remains largely oral and practical. It is learned through repetition, observation, and participation. Children grow up inside it before they can explain it. Adults affirm it together as part of church life. Members don't just memorize the code. They inhabit it. And this is where things begin to change. Because the unwritten nature of the Ordnung is not a weakness. It may actually be one of the reasons it survives. A written code can turn into an object. Something external. Something people argue over like lawyers. But an oral code lives inside relationships. It depends on trust, memory, accountability, and shared understanding. It keeps authority close to the community. It leaves room for local variation. And it reinforces the idea that faith is not only something you believe, but something you practice together. In many Amish districts, members reaffirm the Ordnung twice a year before communion. Church leaders and members address concerns, resolve disputes, and renew their shared commitment. That means the rulebook is never just sitting on a shelf. It is periodically spoken back into the life of the group. In a strange way, that may make it more powerful than a written manual. Because if rules live in a book, you can ignore the book. If rules live in the people around you, you feel them everywhere. You feel them in the clothes you wear, in the road you take, in the machine you choose, in whether your home remains connected to the local church or drifts toward the habits of the outside world. The Ordnung becomes less like legislation and more like atmosphere. And that atmosphere is built around a fear that many modern people barely recognize anymore. The fear of being absorbed. For the Amish, the outside world is not always treated as evil in some cartoonish sense. The danger is more subtle than that. The danger is that the values of the world, speed, individualism, status, convenience, competition, entertainment, self-display, will slowly reorganize the family and the church until Amish life no longer looks Amish at all. That is why technology sits at the center of so many outsider questions. People often imagine the Amish as anti-technology, but that's not quite right. In fact, one of the most revealing things about Amish life is that they do use technology. They simply do not accept it automatically. That difference is enormous. Many Amish communities reject televisions, radios, and personal computers in the home. Most old order groups prohibit connection to public power lines. Many forbid owning automobiles. But batteries may be allowed. Gas-powered equipment may be allowed. Solar power may be used in some settings. A phone might be kept in a separate shed instead of the house. Some Amish business owners use certain tools or devices for work. In some communities, cell phones have appeared in limited ways, especially around business needs, while in others they remain more tightly restricted. To outsiders, this can look inconsistent. Why is hiring a driver better than owning a car? Why is a battery-powered light more acceptable than power from the grid? Why can a tractor be used in one setting but not another? The Amish answer is usually not about the machine itself. It is about the social effect of the machine. Will this device make us more dependent on the outside world? Will it weaken face-to-face family life? Will it encourage pride, mobility, competition, or private convenience at the expense of community? Will it pull work and home in directions the church can no longer guide? Those are the real questions. And once you see that, the logic becomes clearer. A car is not just transportation. It makes distance easy. It can expand personal freedom so quickly that local ties begin to weaken. It allows people to drift farther from the neighborhood, the congregation, the rhythms of mutual dependence. Electricity from the grid is not just electricity. It can open the door to appliances, entertainment, and patterns of life shaped by the larger consumer world. A telephone in the home can change how often the household reaches outward instead of inward. The Amish are not asking, "Is this modern?" They are asking, "What will this do to us?" That question gives the unwritten rulebook its strange moral precision. It is less concerned with novelty than with consequence. And that makes it much more sophisticated than the stereotype suggests. Here's where another myth needs to be cleared away. People often talk about the Amish as if every community is identical. But there is no single Amish lifestyle. There are many Amish affiliations and hundreds of districts, ranging from more conservative groups to communities that allow somewhat more adaptation. The Ordnung varies from district to district. One settlement may be stricter about tools, clothing details, or transportation. Another may permit things the first one does not. So when outsiders say, the Amish do this, the honest answer is often, some do. Some don't. That variation is not proof that the system is collapsing. It is proof that the system is local. Each district has to make practical judgments about how to stay Amish in its own context. Farming, geography, business pressures, tourism, labor markets, and proximity to non-Amish society all affect those judgments. What remains constant is not one universal list. What remains constant is the method. The community decides together where the boundaries should be drawn. And that brings us to one of the most important boundaries of all: baptism. The Amish are Anabaptists, which means they place special importance on adult baptism rather than infant baptism. Most young people are baptized in late adolescence or early adulthood, often somewhere around 18 to 22. And this matters because baptism is not treated as a cultural milestone alone. It is a vow, a lifelong commitment to the church, to the faith, and to the Ordnung of that specific community. In other words, the unwritten rulebook becomes fully binding when a person willingly joins the church. That point is easy to miss from the outside. We tend to imagine Amish children as trapped from birth in a system they never chose. But the Amish themselves place enormous weight on the moment of adult commitment. Before baptism, young people are not yet full church members. If they leave before taking those vows, they generally do not face the same formal church sanctions that baptized members do. That doesn't mean the decision is easy. Far from it. Because choosing baptism is not merely choosing religion. It is choosing an entire social world. Family obligations, work rhythms, marriage prospects, clothing, worship, technology, education, authority, identity, home. In many ways, that choice is bigger than most modern people are ever asked to make. And this is where one of the most famous and most misunderstood Amish customs enters the picture: Rumspringa. Popular culture loves to present Rumspringa as a wild season of rebellion, almost like a reality show built around forbidden freedom. And yes, in some cases, some youth do experiment with parts of the non-Amish world. But the sensational version is deeply misleading. For many Amish young people, Rumspringa is less an explosion and more a transition. It is a period when teens and young adults have greater social freedom than children, especially in courtship and peer life, before deciding whether to join the church. The literal meaning is often described as running around, but that phrase has carried far more drama in the popular imagination than in everyday Amish reality. For many, this period is not about hedonism. It is about discernment. It exists because baptism is supposed to be voluntary. A vow only matters if it can be refused. So before a young person binds himself or herself to the church, there is a season, however calm or turbulent, depending on the person and community, in which the choice becomes real. That is a very different picture from the cliché, and it leads directly to one of the hardest parts of the unwritten rulebook: discipline. If the Ordnung helps define belonging, what happens when a baptized member openly rejects it? This is where the Amish practice of church discipline, including excommunication and shunning in some cases, becomes impossible to ignore. It is also where outside fascination often turns into judgment, because the emotional cost can be severe. For Amish communities, discipline is tied to obedience, repentance, and the survival of the church's moral boundaries. If vows mean something, then breaking them cannot be treated as a private lifestyle tweak. The community understands serious disobedience as a threat not only to the individual's spiritual life, but to the integrity of the group. That is the theological logic. But the human reality is far more painful. To be shunned does not necessarily mean dramatic violence or public spectacle. In many accounts, it means distance, restricted social contact, a table that becomes complicated, a relationship that continues to exist, but under strain. Families can feel torn between love and loyalty to church discipline. Those who leave may feel grief that lasts for years. Parents may believe they are protecting the church while mourning the loss of closeness with a son or daughter. Former members often describe not only freedom, but rupture. This part of Amish life should not be romanticized. But it should not be caricatured either. Because from inside the community, discipline is not understood as cruelty for its own sake. It is understood as part of a covenant. A hard one, sometimes heartbreaking, but still part of a religious system built around vows, accountability, and shared submission. Whether one agrees with it or not, it makes more sense when seen in that context than when reduced to a headline. And if that sounds severe, it is worth remembering something else. The unwritten rulebook is not only about punishment. It is also about stability. In a society built on endless choice, the Amish have chosen limits. That may sound restrictive, but limits can do things freedom alone often cannot. They can simplify life. They can reduce status competition. They can protect neighborhoods from constant churn. They can keep children close to extended family. They can hold work, worship, and home in tighter alignment. They can make belonging visible, daily, unavoidable. Of course, there are trade-offs. Personal freedom narrows. Privacy shrinks. Individual preference often yields to communal expectations. Innovation slows. Some people suffer under the weight of conformity. Some leave because they cannot breathe inside that structure. But that is exactly what makes the Amish story so compelling. They force a question many modern societies avoid. What if convenience is not always an upgrade? What if more options do not always create better lives? What if a community survives precisely because it refuses to optimize everything for individual desire? You do not have to want Amish life to feel the force of that question. In fact, that may be why the Amish fascinate so many outsiders. Not because they are simply different, but because they expose the assumptions of the world around them. They reveal how deeply modern life is organized around speed, choice, entertainment, and private autonomy, and how unusual it has become for any community to put communal restraint above personal preference. That doesn't make the Amish perfect. It doesn't make their system easy. And it certainly doesn't mean every Amish rule is timeless wisdom. But it does mean their unwritten rulebook is doing something most modern rulebooks fail to do. It is shaping a people, not just regulating them. And what makes this even more interesting is how that system keeps adapting without surrendering its core. The Amish have not survived by freezing history. They have survived by slowing it down. Over the years, Amish communities have had to respond to telephones, electricity, automobiles, tractors, wage labor, tourism, business growth, smartphones, and the internet age. Some debates that now look ancient were once brand new and deeply disruptive. There was a time when telephones were the crisis. Then cars. Then power lines. Then tractors. Now digital technology and business communication create new pressures that earlier generations could barely imagine. Yet the basic method remains the same. The community does not ask how to preserve every old object. It asks how to preserve a way of life. That is why certain compromises appear. It is why some Amish-run businesses may use tools that a farmhouse would not. It is why a phone may exist at the edge of the property rather than in the kitchen. It is why some forms of technology are modified, limited, relocated, or stripped of their most socially disruptive effects. These choices can look awkward from the outside because they are not driven by elegance. They are driven by caution. And caution, in Amish life, is not a bug in the system. It is the system. Still, the pressure is real. As more Amish move from farming into small business, construction, manufacturing, and trade, contact with the non-Amish world increases. Economic life becomes harder to keep entirely local. Young people encounter more outside influences. Tourists arrive with cameras and assumptions. Former boundaries are tested by new kinds of work and communication. So no, the Amish are not untouched by modernity. They are negotiating with it constantly, but they are doing so on their own terms, with a seriousness about consequences that the wider culture often lacks. In that sense, the unwritten rulebook is less about nostalgia than about governance. It is a way of asking, again and again, what kind of people we are becoming. And maybe that is the deepest lesson here, because the Ordnung is not powerful simply because it is old. It is powerful because it turns values into habits and habits into a world where clothes teach modesty, where transportation shapes geography, where worship happens in homes, where baptism is treated as costly, where rules are renewed in community, not merely filed in a drawer, where technology must prove that it serves the people, not the other way around. Most modern people live with rulebooks too, of course. They're just written in different places. In algorithms, in office culture, in advertising, in school systems, in the silent expectations of status and success. The difference is that our rules often pretend not to be rules at all. The Amish, at least, know they are choosing boundaries. And that honesty may be one reason their society remains so coherent. So when we ask how the Amish can live by a rulebook that isn't written down, maybe the better question is this: what kind of community becomes possible when the rules are carried not just on paper, but in memory, ritual, and everyday life? For the Amish, the answer has been a centuries-long experiment in disciplined belonging. Imperfect, demanding, sometimes painful, often misunderstood, but undeniably durable. In the end, the unwritten Amish rulebook is not really invisible. You can see it in the shape of a porch, in the cut of a dress, in the distance between a house and a telephone, and a buggy moving slowly down a paved road built for speed, in a young person deciding whether to be baptized, in a family trying to hold love and obedience together, in people asking, generation after generation, not what the modern world allows, but what their community can survive. That is why the rulebook was never meant to be just a book. It was meant to become a life. And maybe that is what has made it so hard to erase. If you enjoyed this documentary, subscribe for more stories that look beneath the surface of communities, beliefs, and the quiet systems that shape the world around us.